Thanks for joining us today. This is Live with Miami's Community News, and I'm Michael Miller. And our guest today is my wife Susan and our good friend and Rabbi Levi Friedman.
Hi.
So Susan is going to be heading up this half an hour with you. So I'm going to be out in a moment. Susan, you are on, and it's all yours, baby.
Thank you, Michael. Hi, Rabbi. How are you?
I'm good, thank God. How are you, Susan?
Fantastic, fantastic. I know you had called me the other day saying that you're interested in doing the live Facebook feed for many reasons, and so we'll get into that later. But first we all have these questions about rabbis and just little questions that you don't hear too much, I'm sure, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right.
I'm
So
sure.
one of the question is, well, first of all, your name is Rabbi Levi Friedman.
Levi Friedman. Levi rhymes with baby. I find people have a hard time pronouncing that for some reason.
Yeah, they say Levi, and it's not Levi.
Spelled Levi, pronounced Levi.
Very good. Good to know.
Now that we've gotten that out of the way, now we can move forward.
Okay.
Great.
Where were you born?
I was born in Brooklyn, New York. So I'm from up northeast. I feel like most of the people down here. Can I say that on the air?
Of course, of course.
So I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and I've been down here in Miami since 2004.
Okay, very good. And where did you go to school?
I went to school up in New York for elementary school and high school, and then for rabbinical college, I moved around a little bit. So I spent a year in Argentina, spent 2 years here in Miami, actually, which is probably what laid the groundwork for me to eventually make the big move to Miami, and then spent a year in Israel, and then back in New York. So a little bit of traveling as part of my education.
Good. So what made you become a rabbi?
What made me, I feel like I wanted to be a rabbi my whole life. I don't remember ever wanting to do anything else, honestly. So it was something that I was sort of focused on really from as far back as I could remember. I think what probably motivated that and the reason I wanted that was I grew up in New York, and I grew up in Crown Heights, which is the headquarters of the Chabad Lubavitch worldwide movement, which maybe we'll have an opportunity to talk about another time. But at the center of life growing up as a child was the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, known commonly as the Rebbe, who was leading this revolution of changing the world and changing it for the better, and had this vision that he kept pushing of a redeemed world, one in which there's no pain and suffering and bigotry and war and hatred. And the way, well, he did that in many different ways, attacked it from different angles. But one of them was he would send young couples out all over the world to share Jewish values, to teach about God, to teach about morality.
These are young rabbis.
These are young rabbis and rebbitzins, so young couples and young families. They'd move out to all over the world, and that was something that just captivated my imagination. It's something that got my attention, and something I always wanted to be a part of since the earliest age. So I guess you could say that it's more than just being a teacher, because a rabbi really at the end of the day is primarily a teacher, but it's really more about being part of a movement, grassroots movement, you can call it, to change the world and to make the world a better place, to impact your surroundings, your environment in a very positive way.
But you came from a long lineage of very important rabbis.
Yeah, but that might be a little boring. You want to hear a little bit?
No, not now. But that's
Yes,
good
but
to
I did. I
know.
do. Yes, I do
Yes.
come from a line of rabbis on both sides of my family. Yeah. So, but to me, but the truth is, I must say that I don't think that it was ever, keeping going along with the family business that motivated me. It was really more about this new way of reimagining the rabbinate and reimagining the role of a rabbi in the world that really got my attention, more so than continuing a line of rabbis, because I think my ancestors that were rabbis functioned in different ways than what I do.
Okay. So I know that a lot of people see the Orthodox, because you're Orthodox Jew,
Okay.
and there are different Orthodox sects around, and people who see them on the streets have questions. For example, they see the strings hanging from your waist. Could you tell us about that?
I'm not going to model them, am I?
Well, you could
Can
show
I
them if
show
you'd
them?
like.
My
Show
strings
them.
hanging down. These
Yeah.
are
The
my strings that
strings?
hang down from my pants.
Yes.
Yeah,
What
okay.
are those?
So the strings are what's called tzitzit in Hebrew, and it's one of the biblical commands written in the book of Exodus that God commands the Jewish people, instructs them to attach fringes to the corners of their garments.
Mm-hmm.
So just to keep it very simple and basic, because there's a lot we can talk about as far as that specific mitzvah or commandment. But basically, the concept, the reason behind it is to remind us of the 613 commandments. So people may have heard of the 10 commandments, but really in the Bible, we talk about the Torah. There are 613 biblical commands, and the mitzvah of tzitzis is unique in that the intention is that it reminds us of all the other commandments. When we see, so in other words, like we basically come with strings attached. Our lives have strings attached to them. So quite, so literally and figuratively. And the way exactly that works is because the word tzitzit in Hebrew has the numerical value in Hebrew, the Hebrew alphabet. Each letter has a number, a number value. So if you were to spell out the word tzitzit in Hebrew, the numerical equivalent would be 600. And then you've got 8 strings. So the fringes are 8 strings, and then you've got 5 knots. You can't really see that, but either way, that comes to 613. So when you see your fringes, that reminds you of the 613 commandments.
And do you wear them every day?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you want to get technical with this? Because
we'll just do general
I
right
like to get technical, as
I know,
I
that's okay.
think you know, and not everybody likes that.
You're very
So,
knowledgeable.
But yeah. So some people, the commandment really is one that stipulates attaching fringes to a 4-cornered garment.
Okay.
So it's not like it's mandatory to wear tzitzis all the time. It's something that if you happen to be wearing a 4-cornered garment, like a poncho, something like what they wore in biblical times, that was basically the dress that they had back then. So then you would attach the strings. But because it's such a special commandment, because it's one that reminds us of all the other commandments, it's one that many Jews opt to do constantly.
And what is it about the...
No, you go everywhere. You just want to dissect my look today. I thought I came in a nice looking suit. I thought I was looking fine, and you just want to dissect my... Okay.
We have questions.
Okay. Yeah, so the skull cap, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you see the Pope wear it, you see...
Right. He's got a nice red one, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
nice red
So the... no, he wears a white one.
I
don't know. It's the wrong program for that. Okay. So the skull cap, it's called a kippah in Hebrew, which is like sort of a domed hat. In Yiddish, actually, it's called a yarmulke, and which is a funny kind of a word. And the word yarmulke, if you break it down, really expresses what the reason behind why we wear it. So the word yarmulke can be divided into the words Yarei me Elokim, which basically means fear of heaven, fear of God. Better than talking about fear, maybe we can talk one day about fear of heaven, what exactly that means. Maybe I'm just throwing a lot out there today, but we'll have to back off of that. But what it means really is awareness of heaven. So the yarmulke, or the kippah, reminds us that there's someone above us at all times, that we're not autonomous beings that have nobody on top of us, but that we're here, we're in somebody else's world, God's world, and we have to be mindful of that. So it keeps us hopefully humble, and it keeps us remembering who we are and our role and place in the world.
So, do all rabbis have beards, or do all bearded men, are they rabbis?
That's a good question. Are all bearded men rabbis, or do all rabbis have beard? The answer is no to both of those.
Okay.
I hope do I get a prize? No. So the beard actually is also, like everything, it's complicated and nuanced, but just generally, the beard is really mystical. And so you'll find Hasidic Jews in particular wear beards. Non-Hasidic Jews, and what is
What's
a Hasidic Jew?
Hasidic?
Right. So what's Chassidic? So that's another question, but you didn't ask it yet, so we can get to it. But
Okay.
so certain segments of the population will wear beards, and other segments won't. The Jews that are maybe more that live their lives more in line with the mystical Jewish tradition would wear beards. That's not exactly the whole picture of it. There are many non-Hasidic Jews or Jews that don't live fully in line with mystical tradition that also wear beards, because traditionally Jews wore beards. That was always the case till fairly recent history. So it was a part of a distinct look of the Jew. But the mystical significance of it, and why I wear a beard, is because we're all created in the image of God. And while God obviously doesn't have a physical image, God is obviously non-corporeal, and so all the terms that we use to describe God are obviously, we're using anthropomorphic language to describe God. But nonetheless, things as they evolve into our physical reality reflect the divine condition in some way, or the divine state. And so the beard is sort of a reflection, actually, of the 13 attributes of divine mercy. And therefore, because there are 13 points of the beard, and that corresponds to God's 13 attributes of divine mercy. And we don't want to limit that in any way. We want to let the attributes of mercy, we want to let mercy flow freely. And so our beards flow freely in that regard.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So what you're saying is, even though somebody has a beard doesn't mean they're a rabbi. Because
Right.
there's a confusion. People
Yes.
think that if there's a beard, there's a rabbi
No,
there.
not. I believe there's a rabbi under all those. But yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So not everybody with a beard is a rabbi, and not everybody without a beard is not a rabbi. There are a lot of
Okay.
rabbis without beards as well. Yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
very good. What are those big, on Miami Beach, we see them.
I'm not on Miami Beach much, so what are you talking about?
So it's the big fur hats that you see?
Right.
What are those?
The fur hats.
And where do they come from?
Where do they come from? Okay. So the fur hats, I actually don't own a fur hat. I don't wear one of those. Not part of
So is
my
it
dress, not part of my garb.
So it's not part of your,
Right.
the Chabad garb.
Right.
It's
But
a
what's
different-
Chabad? See, now we're going to turn the tables.
Oh.
Okay. We'll have a lot I see there's a lot we have to talk about, isn't
A
there?
lot to talk about.
Well, but those fur hats are called streimels, and they are traditionally worn by Hasidic Jews of Polish extraction or Hungarian origins. So the exact origin of them is not exactly known, I don't think, but it goes back several hundred years, and so the Jews that come from those countries where traditionally that was part of their traditional garb, they maintain it in even here in the United States, and even in very hot climates such as Miami and Miami Beach, where it can get very hot, and those hats are probably better worn in the winter. They still retain that tradition. I think part of it is like they wear it on special occasions, so they're not worn every day, right? They're worn on the Sabbath, on Shabbos, which is a holy day, every
On
Saturday, which is a holy day, and other festivals, holidays. So they dust it off for special occasions. And
So it's kind of like your Sunday best.
in
The
a way,
Sunday-
yeah, and
in
in a
layman's
sense, you
terms.
could say it looks sort of like one of these old-fashioned crowns. So it was a crown, on a holy day like that. You want to be dressed in your finest and honor the day properly. So that's why they wear those. Interestingly, the community I grew up in, we didn't wear streimels,
Okay.
and I think that part of the streimels migration from Eastern Europe to the United States and to into a different climate and to a different time, I think part of maintaining that tradition was about sort of remaining set apart and being distinct. So no matter where you go, you really stick out. Now, I feel like I stick out enough as it is, even in a fedora that I'll typically wear, rather than they look like I come right out of the 1950s or something. But the streimel certainly is a distinct look, and I think many of the Hasidic groups and communities felt that it was a way to keep them insulated and to keep them really set apart from the world around them. There's certain elements of my dress, I think, that also set me apart. I mean, the beard and the skull cap that sits this. I mean, there's enough that's distinct. But on the other hand, we don't want to live in isolation. It's really about engaging and interacting with the world and not blending in and not fitting in, not conforming to anything. We're nonconformist, but really to embrace the world around us and try to influence it rather than isolate ourselves and insulate ourselves from it.
So you don't want to become like everybody else. You want to stay within your own
Distinct.
traditions and,
Right.
and the Jewish Orthodox beliefs. But yet you want to also make this world, make a difference in the world.
Yeah.
And what is that difference?
What is that difference? I mean, the difference is to bring redemption to the world. The world is broken. The world has a lot of unholiness. The world has a lot of division, and a lot of immorality. And the idea is that to live in a world where there's no jealousy, where there's no hatred, where there's no bigotry, where there's no disrespecting of others, that's the world that we want to live in. And Judaism and the morality of Judaism has a lot to say, a lot to offer. At the height of that, or right at the epicenter of that, is the idea that we're living in God's world. So if we can all rally around God, which is by definition obviously a concept, something that's bigger than all of us, then we can unite and really, focus on what brings us together rather than what divides us. So I think one of the things that we try to do is, rather than tear down, as a rabbi, I feel like I'm constantly tearing down stereotypes, breaking stereotypes. People assume all kinds of things about me when they see me walking straight out of, as much as I like to think I'm kind of modern, but, look like I come straight out of a history book. So we want to tear down those stereotypes and the labels and the distinctions that people make. But that only is true to an extent. I think really what we want to do beyond that is educate and share the idea that there's something much bigger than any one of us in particular, and that we should all be a part of that bigger reality. Right? So does that make any sense?
Yeah, of course.
So I think, and if we can do that, then we, rather than try to tear down our differences, we can celebrate our differences because we each have something unique to contribute to this bigger picture.
I like that a lot, especially now.
Absolutely.
It's wonderful. Things are being torn down, and it's wonderful to see.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, a lot of things should be torn down.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are a lot of things that do need to be fixed, and there is an element of that as well. But ultimately, the way forward has to be focusing on something bigger than ourselves, focusing on something bigger and something that would be unifying, rather than something that's divisive. But that's, I think, also that's a kind of a big conversation. I think that I think we're all having with our families. I think that's a conversation we're all having with ourselves. It's a conversation we see playing out in the public sphere, and but we need to be able to have an answer. And interestingly enough, Judaism, the oldest of all religions, has a lot to say about life in the future and how we move forward.
Okay, so we already covered. Nick Charles asked how and why did he become a rabbi. I think we covered that. You talked about it's your lineage and plus your passion that you felt when you were growing up. You went to a school called yeshiva.
Yeshiva.
And what is a yeshiva specifically? How is that different than regular secular schooling?
So yeshiva is different than secular schooling. I mean, the format is very different. Yeshiva, the word yeshiva means to really sit. That's because you sit on a bench all day, studying, poring over texts. But the yeshiva way of learning is very different than you'd find in a regular university. Where does most of the learning take place in college? In a library. What happens in the library? You're sitting by yourself quietly. It's always quiet, and that's how you sit and study. You go to a yeshiva, you go into a study hall, and there's noise, and it's loud, and it's animated. It sounds like like a marketplace. There's a lot going on.
A bunch of arguing and
right, and conversation. So the yeshiva way of studying, or the way that Jews have studied really since Mount Sinai, has been to take a text, to grapple with it, to debate it, to see it from any different, from all angles. And so that the way we study is with partners and in sort of a heated conversation. So there's a lot of noise. So you'll have everybody sitting in a big room, in a study hall with their partners, and the noise level will be loud, and sometimes you'll go over to some other friend somewhere and you'll debate it with them and expand that conversation. So that's how the yeshiva style of studying
That's
takes
very
place.
interesting.
It's it's a lot of fun. It's very exciting, actually.
Very different than what we're used to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. See, I mean, studying Jewish texts you're talking about studying divine wisdom, right? So it's not just about accumulating knowledge, right? It's not just about stimulating your brain, your mind. It's itself is a sort of a part of devotion to God, getting to know what He thinks, trying to get into God's brain, as it were, right? Get into God's mind, so to speak. And so that itself is a part of divine service. So it's something that's done enthusiastically and passionately, because it's a practice, an exercise that not only fills your mind with knowledge, but one that hopefully brings you closer to God, brings you closer to the divine, more in tune and more in line with God's message, God's way of thinking, God's perspective, and His will.
So, with that in mind, I know that the Jews are also called the Book of the People or something. They have
the people of the book.
The people of the book. Correct. And why is that? How many books are there? And how does that? I mean, I know you have the Torah, and then from there, what goes on?
Well, saying that we have the Torah, what does that mean? I can ask you, what does that mean, that we have the Torah? So the Jews are called the people, but we were always studying. I think that relates to what I just mentioned about studying Torah as a form of connecting with the divine, more than just accumulating knowledge. So it's not just that Jews value education and the importance of a good education. It's that itself is a part of the divine, that we're put here on this earth, and part of knowing what to do on this earth is to get into God's mind, see what He has to say about life and about life in this world and what the human experience needs to be. So that's it's like the air we breathe. There's a very interesting story about Rabbi Akiva, one of the great sages from about 1900 years ago. Rabbi Akiva, one of the great early sages in Jewish tradition. And he lived in a time of Roman oppression of the Jews, when the Romans were restricting and banning Jewish practice, right? So that itself is really a fascinating story, the evolution of banning ritual and Jewish practice. But anyway, Rabbi Akiva lived in that time, and he defied the orders of the government and taught Torah publicly. And so somebody once asked him, how do you do that and endanger your life? So Rabbi Akiva said, and Rabbi Akiva, by the way, eventually was put to death. He was executed by the Romans. So Rabbi Akiva said, he gives this analogy of a fox walking along the riverbank, and he sees fish swimming, the way fish do, very aggressively, and they seem like in a rush, and they seem a little confused. So he asks the fish, why do you look so stressed out? What's going on? So the fish say, we're trying to evade the nets of the fishermen. So we're constantly milling about to try and avoid those nets. So the fox said, I have a brilliant idea. Why don't you just join me up here on dry land? You'll be spared from the fishermen's nets. So the fish say to the fox, look, up there we're certain to die. Here in our habitat where we can live in water, there's a chance that we survive, and maybe we get caught, maybe we don't. But this is our source of life. So Rabbi Akiva said, Torah is not just about knowledge and education. It's not just enabling me to have a career, or to get a job, or to be able to make it, in life, or make something of myself. That itself, it's an end in itself. Studying Torah, when we study God's wisdom, we come closer to God in a very deep and intimate way. Getting personal with Him, and so that's our life force. So it's not just about it leading to something else. It's about being the very air that we breathe. Did that answer the question? I think.
Very much so. I appreciate that. So basically, you've got the Torah, which is the main.
Oh, so you're talking about the books, right? And why we're the people of the book? That's where okay.
Right.
Now I remembered what you were asking.
Yeah.
So I think that's why we're the people of the book, because we look at it as our lifeline, more than just something to pick up on, or to be an expert in.
Right.
But that's our very life. So we've always obsessed over What is it that God wants of us? That's what we have to ask. And the truth is, every person has to ask themselves that question. We're always asking on some level, what am I doing here? Why am I here?
The purpose.
Yeah, what's my purpose? And that's true for all people. That's true for all of us. And imagine what kind of world we'd be living in if we all asked ourselves that question, right? What's my purpose? Why am I here? What am I needed for? If we can ask that question, we can solve a lot of the world's problems. We'd all be a lot better off. So we're the people of the book in the sense that we're constantly turning back to it. We never stray from it. We always want to know, what is it that God wants of us? And, God is infinite. His wisdom is infinite. So it's a lifetime of study, a lifetime of digging deep and discovering.
Very interesting. Very good. So we have just a couple more minutes. Is there anything that, we should talk about Chabad.org?
Okay.
You wanted to talk about the website?
Chabad.org.
Yeah.
Okay.
Spell it.
Spell Chabad.org. CHABAD.org. That's Chabad.org. Chabad.org is a great resource for Judaism. So questions like the Strimal or the tzitzis or the yarmulke, if you can figure out how to enter it into a search, you can find all kinds of information about that. And it's a great, I think it's the largest resource of Jewish ideas and teachings that you'll find on the internet. So in English, I mean, they have other languages as well, but so that's a great resource if you want to learn more about anything we've talked about, if you want to learn more about Judaism, and really more about what Judaism has to say about humanity and what God wants of all of us here in the world. That's a great resource.
So if somebody were to come up to you on the street and ask you a question, would that be jarring to you, or would you?
No, that makes my day.
Yeah.
That always makes my day. I appreciate it when people approach me and have questions. Always happy to answer them. Absolutely. That's a lot better than people seeing you and crossing the street. I've seen that happen too.
And making assumptions about things, right? Instead of asking questions.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is hopefully we're going to continue this conversation. We will further answer questions that anybody has on Facebook. And
Yeah, I mean, I think what we wanted to do this, get together so we can have some conversations about some ideas and values, and just create a space where we can bring some more light and positivity to the world. We could all use that in our lives, and hopefully this is something that becomes a little interactive. So if people want to ask questions online, they can still post, and we can gather those questions, and those are things that hopefully could lead to more interesting conversation in the future. So I look forward to that.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us. It was very interesting.
Thank you so much for having me, and we look forward to doing this again.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye.
All right.